Now, Cosatu's welcomed that announcement by Finance Minister eNCA. They say this will provide badly needed relief to workers, commuters and an economy struggling to cope with painful fuel price increases and the resultant rise in cost of transport, food and consumer goods. Let's discuss this further with Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, Matthew Parks, who joins us from Cape Town. Matthew, thanks for your time, as always. If I could just get your initial reaction to that story from my colleague Lindsay Denlinger, where some opposition parties have raised their eyebrows at the sale of those strategic fuel reserves to fund this fuel levy cost. What's the Cosatu stance on that specific part of this announcement today?
Well, look, I think maybe 3 points. One is that we welcome the relief. It's going to help significantly to cushion workers, commuters, the economy at large. R1.50 might seem like a small amount, but when you calculate that maybe a car might consume 50 litres of petrol a week, that's 75 Rand a week. That's about 300 Rand a month. So that's something significant for an individual commuter. But if you take into account the impact upon food prices, it does help to cushion us, not completely, but a significant cushioning, albeit for 2 months. I think, look, it's a difficult situation government is in, that we're all in. The other option was for government to take it out of the fiscus, but then where does that money come from? Does it come from the salaries of nurses? Does it come from the presidential promise stimulus to provide work opportunities for young people? Do you take it from the 350 grant for unemployed persons? So I think we're comfortable with taking it by the selling of the strategic fuel reserves. We think there is sufficient space to do it. It's for a short period of 2 months to give some breathing space to commuters, to workers, to the economy. I think it's the best option in very difficult circumstances, but we now need to look at additional relief beyond the 2-month period because we don't know how long will the oil price remain high, how long will the conflict in Ukraine last, and of course there could be other further developments down the road which we have no control over internationally.
Now, the fuel levy topic is nothing new to you as Cosatu. I remember just last year, Cosatu called for new legislation to help reduce the tax burden on motorists and consumers in the country. You, along with many other organizations, have been banging on this drum for some time now, because we're looking at almost 50% of our petrol or fuel costs actually going to tax coffers. And that's something that really cannot continue. Are you hoping that this is perhaps the first look at government finally giving into those many calls from organizations such as yourself?
We hope so. I mean, it was positive that the Minister of Finance in his budget speech last month made their commitment. I think it's positive that the Minister of Finance and the Minister for Mineral Resources have now provided a short-term relief. They have highlighted some medium-term relief options as well, which you don't think are really strong enough. I think for us, the principle is that the fuel price is suffocating the economy. It's bleeding workers' pockets. It's going to fuel inflation, which is going to hurt everybody. So we need to fix it. And as you're saying, half the price of fuel is about 4 levels of taxes. So it's too much. We think there's a couple of things we need to do. One is to review the fuel price regime to see if we can lessen the burden. The second is to fix metro rail so we can get 10 million workers, urban commuters out of the cars into trains. That lessens our exposure to petrol, eases congestion on the road. So we need to fix metro rail, which includes deploying the police and the defence force to secure its lines, tackling copper cable theft, and so forth. We need also to see how can we invest further in public transport to lessen the amount of people who have to drive to work. We also need to see about what can we do to gradually begin to move our cars, when we produce quite a few cars in South Africa, from fuel cars to electric vehicles. So there's quite a few things that can be done there, and those are medium and longer term. The other critical point is that a huge chunk of the fuel price regime goes to the road accident fund. It has a huge amount of liabilities of about 400 billion rand. So that's the biggest liability to the state outside of Eskom. It's on a downward trajectory. There's been huge problems of corruption and poor governance there, but also there's a problem there how it's structured, that lawyers profiting out of the road accident fund. They help to bankrupt it, equally because the state is so inefficient and administrative. So we need to fix it, but we also need to see the Department of Transport by June this year retabling the road accident fund and the road accident benefit schemes bills back at Parliament, because those seek to overhaul the RAF, put it on a sustainable trajectory, remove the lawyers from the process so the money goes only to the to the claimants, not to lawyers who are profiteering. We think if you do those 5 things, that will help to ease our exposure to international oil prices, help to reduce our dependency upon petrol, and move to a cleaner future going forward.
Now, some of those things really sound like a no-brainer, Matthew. I'm sure you would agree. Specifically I'm no infrastructure and economic expert, but if you asked me today, or asked anybody really today, if you had to pick between all of those tax levies on the petrol price, going to either the road accident fund or going into finally getting our public transport system back up and running and improved, because so many South Africans depend on it, but so many more South Africans would love to be able to depend on it if it was safe and it was dependable. What's got to give for us to finally decide, or for government to finally decide, that this is where they really need to make a difference in fixing up our rail system and just making it dependable for ordinary South Africans?
It's difficult to explain why we're in this mess. We know that the decade of state capture, which decimated Transnet, it decimated Metro Rail, have bled the state of money needed to invest in infrastructure, the economy. But oftentimes it's just simple lack of leadership, simply incompetent management. The fact that we bought trains which were not the right size, the fact that during COVID-19 we allowed Metro Rail to be literally destroyed, we allowed informal settlements to be built upon train tracks. You can't explain this kind of chaos or incompetency, poor leadership. We hope that in this extent of this crisis, government is going to wake up to begin to fix it. The alternative is much worse. The alternative is that we see the complete destruction of Metro Rail. Road congestion will get even worse. We see the destruction of Transnet, and that's going to bleed mining and manufacturing and agriculture. So we have to fix these things, but it can be done, Marcel. We've seen with SARS, when you appoint competent leadership, you can turn things around. So what we need is to see is competent leadership, and to deal with those who are criminals, those who steal and those who loot. That's what you'll see that will begin turning the corner.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator, speaking to us live there from Cape Town. Matthew Parks, thank you for your time.